Members, I am fairly certain that I have given birth more recently than anyone else who serves in this chamber. Many of y'all have met my daughter, Lark. She's almost 3 years old now, and I'm so grateful to have her in my life. Being pregnant with her was one of the most vulnerable experiences of my entire life. Especially, as many of y'all know, I was on the campaign trail in a moment where we were all talking about maternal mortality. I was touring the hospital maternity wards, asking questions that kind of scared the other women on the tour about where the hemorrhage kits were stored and what their preeclampsia protocols were. Now, neither of those were the complication in pregnancy I had. The complication I had was called hyperemesis. Y'all probably know it more commonly as really bad morning sickness. Whoever named it morning sickness, I'm mad at them because that's a lie. For me, it was 24 hours a day. I was so sick that I vomited more than a dozen times a day. I couldn't eat anything for weeks. I lost 20 pounds. You know, at this time, my pregnancy wasn't public yet. I had folks walking up to me telling me how great I looked, and I was just like, y'all, I just want to be able to eat and be able to keep it down. It was hard. It was really hard. And there were days I woke up in the early days of this so desperately wanted pregnancy and didn't know if I could make it to the end. We've talked a lot about heartbeats today. The first time I, through a Doppler device, heard a heartbeat sound from my daughter, I didn't enjoy that moment. I was trying not to vomit from the pressure of that device on my stomach. I bring this up because, especially having that type of complication, being on the edge of hospitalization, being so weak, it was all I could do to get myself from the bed to the bathroom. Knowing abortion was available in the state of Texas made me feel safer. It made me feel safer to know that I had options.
Members, please take your conversations outside the chamber.
It made me feel safer to know that I had options if the hyperemesis got worse, if I reached the point where I couldn't keep fluids down. And I know this isn't something folks are particularly familiar with, but this is a condition that used to kill women. Charlotte Bronte being a notable name. And again, abortion being accessible made me feel safer and made me more certain that I was going to get to the end and that I could find a path and that I had choices if something else went wrong. And luckily I got through that and enjoy my wonderful daughter today. Part of why I bring this up is when we heard this bill and others in the Public Health Committee, we heard the story of a woman who was already a mother caring for a toddler who was pregnant and had horrible hyperemesis and had to make the choice between being able to get out of bed and take care of her toddler or continue the pregnancy. That woman made the choice to take care of that child who had already been born despite her illness. She made the choice to have an abortion so she could take care of that baby. Members, as the member who has most recently had a baby in this building, I get asked by y'all all the time when the next one's coming, and there won't be a next one for me because I was so sick, and I know if I get that sick again, I will be in that position. That's what that choice means to women in this building. Everyone's abortion story is different. Every single one of them. And every one of us in this room has a different standard for what we believe constitutes an ethical and moral decision to have an abortion. But instead of trusting women to know their own circumstances, their families, and their own values, this bill makes the government the final arbiter of individual and intimate morality. Members, is trusting women really that unthinkable? We know what our families need. We know what we need. This bill would force a woman to carry a pregnancy that resulted from rape to term. Now, there are some women that is the right choice for, but there are some women who are going to struggle to wake up every morning and have the evidence of a horrible assault on their body. Members, this bill would force a woman whose fetus had been diagnosed with a severe abnormality, inconsistent with life, to carry that pregnancy to term every day, knowing that she would never get to hold that baby in her arms. And we've heard today about one of our own colleagues who made that type of choice. And it was the right choice for her. And it's not the right choice for every single woman. Do you really want to take that away? Members, this legislation would force a woman who is in such difficult circumstances because of the pregnancy that she is considering taking her own life to carry that pregnancy to term. I know we talk a lot about postpartum depression in this building, but depression during pregnancy is also a serious concern for women's health. This bill specifically carves out risk of death from self-harm from exceptions that would allow an abortion. Members, this bill would force a woman to carry a pregnancy to term if she knows she doesn't have the resources or the options or the support to care for that child. It would force her to carry that pregnancy to term if she knows that that pregnancy will have permanent impacts on her health and well-being. The only exception in this is for life-saving, not debilitation. So members, I ask you why. We have a lot of conversations about abortion in this chamber, but this is the most extreme. This is taking away every option. This is saying to every woman in the state of Texas that you don't trust them to know their own circumstances and their own needs. Members, I'm 35. Unlike some of my colleagues who spoke about this earlier, I grew up taking access to abortion and birth control as well for granted. Those were obvious things to me. I, some of you know, grew up pro-life, grew up believing that abortion should be illegal, and walked away from that as I realized more and more the rights that we need to have over our bodies. Members, there are women across Texas who take this right for granted right now, who take for granted that if they are pregnant in a circumstance that doesn't work with their life, who take for granted that if they become pregnant and there's a severe fetal abnormality, who take for granted that if they become pregnant from a sexual assault, that they will have access to abortion. I know there's a lot of voices in your ears right now about people advocating for this legislation and telling you why it's needed. But members, you pass this and you're going to hear the voice of women who have taken this right for granted and have realized that they have to fight for it. So I ask you to keep those voices in mind. I ask you to think of women like me in their 30s and 20s and their teens who have assumed that this is settled law. And ask yourselves, what happens if it's not? What happens next when women decide to stand up for these rights again? What happens when women across Texas say no more? Members, I urge you to oppose this bill and instead affirm your trust in the women of Texas to make their own decisions instead of passing them off to the government.